Hello. So this video lecture will hopefully be a good short one. I'm going to talk about the 3 rhetorical appeals. So let's jump in. To persuade an audience, you need to connect with that audience. One of the key ways to do that is through the use of rhetorical appeals. There are 3 rhetorical appeals: ethos, pathos, and logos. Ethos is the ethical appeal of the writer's credibility, goodwill, and trustworthiness. This is how the author convinces the audience that there's someone worth listening to, that the audience should believe what they're saying, right? Ethos is essentially how a speaker shows the audience that they know their shit. Ethos can come from professional expertise, either your own expertise or reference to someone else who has that expertise. It can also come from personal experience. You've lived this thing or seen this thing, and that makes you an expert on it. It can also come from appealing to like more traditional sorts of authorities, such as like the Bible or the law or various other religious authorities or non-religious authorities. Ethos also includes the speaker establishing common ground with the audience. So common ground is a belief or value shared by the writer and audience that provides the basis for agreement. So demonstrating sort of the like, you're not so different, you and I, connects with the audience. An audience that identifies with you is an audience that's going to see you as credible and acting in good faith, and therefore want to listen to what you have to say. Pathos is the emotional appeal of language and examples that stir the audience's feelings. When we appeal to emotion, that means you're appealing to your audience's sympathy and empathy. And in order to do that, you need a clear understanding of the beliefs and values held by that audience, or else you won't know what they would sympathize or empathize with. Pathos has to be genuine. Emotionally manipulating an audience is not pathos because that is not a genuine connection. When you're analyzing the use of pathos in a text, you want to make sure to identify the specific emotions that the audience or that the writer or speaker is evoking in their audience. Emotion is an incredibly broad term that encompasses a wide breadth of quite different phenomenons, right? Like feeling angry is very different from feeling happy, and then emotions obviously get more complicated from just those like very basic ones. It's highly unlikely that the author of a text is evoking the entire spectrum of human emotion at once. Logos is an appeal to the audience's reason through the logical construction of the argument. So this is not just the use of facts and figures, but any sort of evidence. It can include facts and figures, statistics, testimonials and anecdotes, expert opinions, and sometimes even your own personal experience. Logos is also like not just evidence, but the shape of the argument as a whole as well, like the way that the argument is crafted and its overall construction. I'm going to illustrate these concepts by walking through an example. It's a video of Kerry Washington reading Sojourner Truth's Ain't I a Woman speech, which Truth, a formerly enslaved woman, delivered at the 1851 Women's Rights Convention. You can find the text of the speech, I imagine, readily available online or in the new Harbrace Guide on pages 25 to 26.
Well, children, where there is so much racket, there must be something out of kilter. I think that twixt the Negroes of the South and the women at the North all talking about rights, the white man gonna be in a fix pretty soon. But what's all this here talking about? That man over there says that women need to be helped into carriages and lifted over ditches and to have the best place everywhere. Nobody ever helps me into carriages or over mud puddles or gives me any best place. And ain't I a woman? Look at me. Look at my arm. I have plowed and planted and gathered into barns, and no man could head me. And ain't I a woman? I could work as much and eat as much as any man when I could get it. And I could bear the lash as well. And ain't I a woman? I have borne 13 children, seen most sold off into slavery. And when I cried out with a mother's grief, none but Jesus heard me. And ain't I a woman? And they talk about this thing in the head. What is it they call it? Oh, that's right, yeah, intellect. That's it, honey. Well, what's that got to do with women's rights and Negroes' rights? If my cup won't hold but a pint and yours holds a quart, wouldn't you be mean not to let me have my little half measure full? That man in the back there, he says women can't have as much rights as men because Christ wasn't a woman. Well, where did your Christ come from? Where did your Christ come from? He came from God and a woman. Man didn't have nothing to do with it. If the first woman God ever made was strong enough to turn the world upside down all alone, well, these women here together ought to be able to turn it back and get it right side up again. And they asking to do it. The men better let them.
So Truth's ethos is an interesting case in that it's derived from her personal experience, right? Ethos doesn't always have to come from traditional forms of authority, and instead, her firsthand lived experience is the source of her expertise. She also references the Bible, which, as the NHG points out, would have been viewed as the highest possible authority by her audience. A lot of women's rights activists, especially, were quite religious. So, like to them, to the audience whose values and beliefs she understood, if God says it, it must be true. Pathos is heavy here, right? She evokes sympathy and feelings of grief in her audience, referencing the 13 children she gave birth to while enslaved, and the grief she felt as a mother when the children were themselves sold into slavery. And she also appeals to a sense of charity or kindness when she says that intellect doesn't have anything to do with the question of women or African Americans' rights. Right? She says, if my cup won't hold but a pint and yours holds a quart, wouldn't you be mean not to let me have my little half measure full? Then her logos, her argument is shaped around refuting common arguments against women's rights, right? So she takes the argument that women are frail and in need of constant help and refutes it by drawing on evidence from her firsthand experience as an enslaved woman who worked in the fields and as a mother who gave birth 13 times. And here is a good example of where we see the rhetorical appeals overlapping. The personal experience that lends her the ethos and the emotional pain and grief that contribute to her pathos are also what she draws on for evidence to prove her argument or her logos. Another example is that she uses Christ having been born from a woman as a direct refutation to the argument that women are beneath men because Christ was a man. So there we see again her ethos and her logos overlapping in that appeal to that authority as evidence against the argument that she's refuting. So I hope this helped illuminate the rhetorical appeals. Hopefully through this example, you can see how the three rhetorical appeals, ethos, pathos, logos, come together to appeal to a writer or speaker's audience, as well as how the rhetorical appeals can often overlap with one another. Thank you for watching, and have a good day until next time. Bye.